She was Hi, I'm back with the 25 books 2025 according to Great Yarmouth, and it's Meg Rosoff, okay, How I Live Now, okay, which book came out in 2004, which is 4 years before the Hunger Games. However, it's quite interesting too because this book follows a first person narrative, as does the Hunger Games, which as such, Daisy, it's also makes her in a way an unreliable narrator. Now, I've got some issues with this book, however, I'm going to get to them when we get there. So, yep, I actually made a post-it note. Published 2004, 4 years before the Hunger Games. That's 2008. So here we are. Right. 15-year-old New Yorker Daisy thinks she knows all about love. Her mother died giving birth to her, and her father sent her away for the summer to the English countryside with cousins she's never met. Then she'll discover what real love is, something violent, mysterious, and wonderful. There her world will be turned upside down, and a perfect summer will explode into a million pieces. How will Daisy live then? Right, so yes, let's imagine like a love story where the apocalypse happens. Right, so very, very interesting book. Very, very interesting. It was turned into a film, okay? And interesting too because her name actually isn't Daisy, it's Elizabeth, but her the name's Daisy is what she's known by. Okay, here we are. I'm coming off this plane and I'll tell you why that is later. I'm landing at London Airport. I'm looking around for a middle-aged kind of woman who I've seen in pictures who's my Aunt Pen. Photographs are out of date, but she looks like the type who would wear a big necklace and flat shoes, with maybe some kind of narrow dress in black or grey. But I'm just guessing since the pictures only ever showed her face. It isn't true because London Airport is like London Airport or Heathrow Airport. So once again, a kind of unreliable narrator, if you will. I mean, I'm thinking, is this Heathrow or London? And it's not London, it's London City. Once again, it's just the little things in this book that make Daisy an unreliable narrator. Okay? So, and then she meets her cousin Edmund, who is known as Eddie in the film. There's a film we're going to get to later. So she's taken her to the countryside where Piper Osbert, who Osbert is not in the film, by the way, essentially they kind of live kind of like a carefree existence. They've got like a farm. Her mother, sorry, the mother actually Aunt Penny is actually quite high up though in the government. Who she kind of disappears from the narrative when the world goes to hell. So Daisy, by the way, in this Daisy who has ED, she has a disorder. She that's kind of focused on, but never really addressed much in detail. Daisy mentions, okay, her weight or rather lack of it, and the fact, okay, she's there. She's there because her father's got married again. There's a new baby on the way, and obviously, okay, she has a disorder. So her father thought if I to get enough to her her mother's family, she will kind of help recover in the English countryside. Hey, great mentality, great mentality, right? But when it comes to Daisy's ED, it's bit here, okay? According to my best friend Lee D, the D would have liked to poison slowly till I turned black, I swelled like a pig and died in agony. But I guess that plan flopped when I refused to eat anything, and in the end she sent me off to live with a bunch of cousins I never met a few thousand miles away, while she and Dad and the Devil's Spawn went off on the merry ways. She was making even the slightest attempt to address centuries of bad press of stepmothers, who scored a big fat zero. Right, the D is the stepmother. So that's the thing. So then, okay, you meet Piper. Okay, now Piper's a very interesting character because Piper is very, very young. She's like the youngest person on his family. She's about 10 years old, but she does virtually everything. She's smart, she's supportive. She actually is she's actually like a fully functioning adult. Now, I'm going to address this, okay, because there was a film, okay, which came out several years ago, and I made a bit of a note on the back of this film. Edward is called Eddie, okay. No Osbert, the cousin, okay, he's out of the thing. Saoirse Ramsey played Daisy, okay. George Malcolm played Eddie. Baby Tom Holland played baby Isaac, little Isaac, okay. And Piper was played by Harley Bird. Now, I will give her some respects. The film was very, very good, and she's a very, very good actress. She was brilliant in the film. She was absolutely wonderful. She also appeared in an episode of Doctor Who as well. Can't remember which one. And however, one little snag is she's the voice of Peppa Pig. Now I have in total 10 nephews, nieces, and nephews. 10. So I have watched more episodes of Peppa Pig than most singletons ever will, and I can't stand Peppa Pig. So you can imagine, okay, watching a film where every time Piper, who was a fantastic character, every time she opened her mouth, all you heard was Peppa bloody Pig. So no respect to you, okay, Harley Bird. You're a great actress, incidentally. and there's a new Peppa Pig now. And as of doing this, Peppa Pig is now about to get a new sibling. But anyway, however, every time you open your mouth, you hear Peppa Pig. I was like, please, will someone get off this child? Not think it's the voice. It's the voice, please. Absolutely. So, but of course, whilst they're enjoying this rose petal summer, whilst Daisy is starting to get better, right? And Aunt Pen goes off to Oslo to kind of like sort out because there's a big kind of political thing going on. Here you go. Right. I didn't give much chance to sit back and enjoy being orphans before things started happening. The first thing that happened wasn't our fault. That was a bomb that went off in the middle of a big train station in London the day after Aunt P went to Oslo, and something like 70,000 people got killed. This obviously went down badly with the population, for the populace at large. It was pretty scary, etc. To be honest, it didn't seem to have much to do with us way off in the country. It did affect us when it was made. Affect us. However, it did affect us when it made them close all the airports, so that no one could get home for the foreseeable future. Namely, Aunt Pen. Aunt Pen is never seen again, by the way. Now remember, this is all from Daisy's point of view. Unreliable narrator. Okay, unreliable narrator. And Aunt Pen is kind of exited the scene, and then suddenly, okay, they start talking, okay, about the enemy, and the enemy is never addressed. Absolutely, no one even knows who this enemy is. I don't think even Daisy knows who this enemy is. She is stuck in the countryside after all. Here we are, right? We figured if the enemy was going to come all the way down here, we'd better think of a way to make ourselves too invisible. Though in fact, the main reason was it was something to do. So at this time, okay, the thought of war is more like a game to them. Well, they could come here. The enemy could come here. So you better kind of, start making provisions, turn it into a game. So Emma, Isaac, and Edmund and I, so Piper, Isaac, Edmund and I started dragging provisions and blankets and books up to the lambing barn, which normally just stored hay, and just set up there, right? And it was Piper who incidentally starts organising all this, okay? But then in all this, now remember, first person narrative is her and Edmund fall in love. Now, there's been a lot of criticism about this book because underage, incidentally, and their first cousins, which is totally frowned upon. Okay, it is known as first cousin incest. You cannot do this review, cannot mention that. However, I also need to mention, okay, no one ever told these children, okay, that it was not the dumb thing to do. There's no indication, okay, right, and here you go. But it needs to be addressed. It would be a much easier story to tell if it was all about chase and perfect love between two children against the end of the world at extreme time in history. But let's face it, that would be a load of crap. The real truth is that the war didn't have much to do with it, except it provided a perfect limbo in which two people who were too young and too related could start kissing without anyone or anything making us stop. There were no parents, no teachers, no schedules. There's nowhere to go and nothing. Right, so nothing to do that would remind us that this was the sort of thing that didn't happen in the real world. There was no longer was any real world, right? So her and Edmund start hooking up. Now, in the film, that's kind of glossed over because there would have been a lot of criticism for that. But no one told him it was wrong. But I think at her core, Daisy knows that it is. It was like, this is a book that's actually looking back on her life. It's kind of acknowledging, yes, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. But there was no one around to tell us that no. Absolutely no one around, okay, to tell us no. Right. And as it says Daisy actually looking back on her life, little bits here, kids, is her acknowledging how wrong it is. So here we are to carry on our happy little life of underage sex, child labour and espionage when someone came to visit us, which after weeks of just us five kind of took us all by surprise, to put it mildly. And it turns out, okay, that it's kind of like, well, hold on, you're all underage, even though, okay, they're functioning fine with the farm and the house and everything. But they, in the end, they're taken away. Isaac, Edmund, and Osbert are taken away, okay, to essentially fight. The house is taken over, okay, by the military, and Daisy and Piper are sent to a major's family, right? And it's interesting too, because this is the moment where war really cuts coming into this world. War, they're kind of blissful days, okay, of the countryside are now over. Now, okay, they're fussing to a war zone. Now, okay, they've got to like pick provisions. Now they've got to actually work towards this. And one thing is interesting too, because this enemy is never ever really addressed. Once again, it's Daisy being an unreliable narrator, and also she just generally doesn't know because no one's telling her anything because she is a literal child. She's a teenager. Now, she thinks, okay, she knows it all, but she knows nothing. Okay, remember, it's Piper who is the one who's several years younger, but she's the one, okay, actually gets stuff done, if you will. But the fact is, there are some very nice versions of this book. Now, I'm so used to characters in post-apocalyptic fiction like this one of becoming the chosen one. Look at Katniss. She becomes, okay, which is published 4 years later. She becomes, okay, the figurehead of a movement, okay, to tear down the government. Okay, so this is not this. Actually, I love the realism of this. It was Daisy being the unreliable narrator and being a child in war. Now, Osbert, they weren't separated, by the way. I forgot to mention that he actually goes off to fight, and then Isaac and Edmund, sorry. Isaac and Edmund, okay, they get separated to go off to fight in another direction. So with this, now suddenly Daisy, who's been living this kind of like carefree life, okay, suddenly she's faced surrounded by the military, and no one would tell her anything. It's one thing I loved about this book is the fact is no one would tell her anything because she's a child. Here we are. When Major McAvoy came home later that night, I accosted him the second he stepped through the door, demanding that he'd say wherever Edmund and Isaac had been moved somewhere else, and if so, where? Right. I first looked stunned, like maybe he'd forgotten he had a 15-year-old daughter, and then he smiled a little and said, I don't think we've been properly introduced. Not telling anything. And in this, okay, Piper and Daisy have been put to work, okay, and the fact is, when Major McAvoy's talking, okay, about the war, little things too. Now, you kind of get a sense of what's going on in the outside world, but always some other people. Once again, a very nicer version that Daisy does not see this, but she hears about it. Nicer versions. Here we are. Later, Major M told us, you'll be amazed at the number of things that can go wrong for civilians in a war. For instance, he said, let's say a kid gets appendicitis or breaks his leg, and there was no telephone to tell anyone, and a bone was sticking out of his thigh, no petrol to drive a car to the field hospital, if you happen to know where it was in the first place, and get a big shortage of antibiotics. They managed to get the kid to a surgeon somehow. I wanted to make sure he or she didn't die of an infection in a week later. Right. Other people basically are forming Daisy of treatments for babies, okay, for IVF treatment, which is now stopped, okay, or people who actually had lives before this, now, okay, in like a military area, picking apples, okay, for the military, which is her job. Right. And one thing is this, is as they are the youngest people in this area, in a way, Piper I loved as a character, is she knows how to manipulate people. She's young, she's turned, she's cute, and in the film she's voiced by Peppa Bloody Pig. I mean, come on. So in this, everyone starts to adore Piper. And I like the fact, okay, it's set in a way, okay, and I think Daisy feels a little bit jealous of that. A little bit less special, if you will. In this, okay, right. My first job was picking early apples, which was somewhat more useful than hanging around on the outskirts of the Pipe Appreciation Society. Got a lot of doubtful looks at the first about whether I was strong enough to work so hard, but those days determination was untensed to the law, and at times went on. There were a lot of thin people around me. I didn't stand out so much. Just imagine, okay, Daisy has an ED, right, and she's in a war. Now, when they first approach her, of course, okay, she is underweight, if you will. However, as time goes on, more people are. That's quite interesting, okay, for Daisy, because as everyone has looked at her because of her ED, now as people come into this who are also in the same position as her, she becomes kind of like less special. She becomes like the norm. Her weight level is the norm, which is quite frightening in a war zone. Absolutely. Right. And she kind of points out, yeah, I didn't stand so much. I blend in now because now everyone's like me. Everyone's like me. So after the military area is bombed, Daisy gets into her head to go home, back to the countryside. She doesn't know, okay, if her cousins will be there. Osbert isn't, okay, he's not seen again, but see if Edmund and Isaac are there. So, here you go. But they're clueless. Once again, okay, this is where Piper really kind of steps up because she knows, okay, the countryside and the berries to eat and the right food to eat and how to get there. Right. So, whilst the case being bombed, they just slip away. Here you go. We're completely clueless about how safe we'll be walking around out here. At the soldiers had said, soldier said, there are hundreds of people heading into the countryside, away from the action in order to try to disappear, without the trouble, which suggests it would be like walking around in a shopping mall. On the other hand, I've got the feeling there were more than enough footpaths in England to go around, and the average refugee would be interested in socialising. The soldiers' theory was that most of the people were likely to meet would be English people, but also said that wouldn't mean they would shoot you on sight. Right. Interesting too, because you think, just be this suggestion, that whilst they're on this journey to get back to the home, they would meet people, they become a little social group. They don't. It is just them against the elements. And once again, this is Piper stepping up. Daisy thinks okay she's in control, but it's not. It's purely Piper. Absolutely. And one thing also, okay, with Daisy is when, okay, she actually acknowledges to herself how goddamn clueless she is. I mean, little things like she decides to leave, okay, the military area after it's been attacked and Major M's actually killed, okay. But I've been imagining what we would do if the farm had been taken over by the enemy and Isaac and Edmund had everyone else was taken prisoner, but had to pretend they was still alive because there was no way out. So you know what, any person with an ounce of sanity is going to walk on starvation rations for almost a week, believing in the possibility of bad news. You don't always get a chance to choose the kind of news you get. That's interesting, and also is a lack of mention of Osbert. Now, Osbert, okay, was like the more kind of like quieter cousin. However, as he's left and he's not mentioned again, it's just basically Daisy acknowledging, okay, that he's most likely dead. Same with Aunt Pen. They're removed from the text. It's her way of kind of like compartmentalizing, okay, the issue. This is an actual war zone. They come across dead bodies whilst they're on their journey. Basically, the war has encroached on the countryside. And in a way, okay, of Daisy, okay, kind of compartmentalizing her trauma is to kind of like remove the people from her mind. Right. Okay, is when they do finally get back to the farmhouse, when they do finally get home, it's once again interesting subversions, okay? And this bit here, right? There were no messages, no notes, nothing that told us where to find Edmund and Isaac, but on the good side, there were also no smashed windows or stuff spread around the walls just for the sake of it. A lot of furniture had been thrown out in the barn, and most of the rest was shoved in the corners of the room or turned upside down, and there were broken dishes everywhere, and the ones that weren't broken were caked and filthy, and the toilets were overflowing, and there was mud and dirt all over the rugs. We expected the house to be absolutely trashed or burnt down, so, but the thing is, this bit here, okay? Right, the big table was covered with heaps of papers. There were maps drawn on the wall and no food except what I found in the pantry the first day. Now, the thing is this, is that you'd think that anyone else could be looking at these maps and the wall to find out what is going on. But Daisy doesn't do that. Once again, you never ever find, it's kind of like dropping hints. It's kind of, if Daisy would look even deeper, look at these maps, look what's on the walls, look at these papers, she would have an indication. But she doesn't, and that's never shared with the audience whatsoever, with the viewer, with the reader. Now, the thing is this, Osbert moved the narrative, however, Isaac and Edmund show up, okay, did be traumatized and absolutely. Now, you think, okay, this is also the moment where Daisy is going to kind of like rebuild Isaac's life, okay, rebuild Isaac, rebuild Edmund, and basically all kind of live together because Aunt Pez never coming home and live on the farm. No, that doesn't happen. Now, once again, Daisy's been an unreliable narrator, but instead they come to her door and she's sent back. She is sent back to the USA against her will, against all reason. She doesn't want to go back, right? You know, you have Isaac and Edmund who are deeply traumatized, right? But instead, they are left essentially in the care of Piper, and she's sent back to the USA. Interesting too, because reuniting with a family, you think a big tearful reaction. It's not. Essentially, in this, has essentially dulled Daisy's senses. In a way, okay, she's absolutely traumatized. It's just her looking back on her life, compartmentalizing it after all. And it doesn't go into depth because, in a way, this Daisy in the future essentially is describing this life. She's too traumatized. Right. And she actually sent to a clinic, and but after she's discharged, this bit here. I left the bosom of my family within a few days of being discharged from the hospital. Most of the schools are closed, and it was hard to see the point of education in the midst of all the death and destruction anyway. Moved into a derelict office building near what used to be Grand Central. No one wanted to live in that neighbourhood anymore, but I liked it. The sky was bigger now, and except for the occasional shooting, it was quiet. Right. Around the corner was the New York Public Library, main branch 42nd and 5th. I assumed they were desperate for staff. Everyone in that neighborhood was. An interviewer asked how I felt about bomb threats and snipers, and were impressed by what they took to be my courage. I was the only one who applied for the job, which may explain why I didn't seem to mind about my previous job experience, which has been in a psychiatric facility. So, interesting. That is so interesting when you think about it. Daisy is so traumatized. So even though okay, she's living a single life in New York, it's not even brushed upon. It's like her focus is to get back to England, to get back to Edmund. Okay? Right. Who is traumatized, okay, from the war. Absolutely. To the point, okay, he can barely even speak. But the fact is, okay, to Daisy, that's her salvation. She's his. Right. So she finally makes it back to the UK. Right, gets a plane back, totally ignores her family. And I had no idea how damaged Edmund is. I just know that he needs peace and needs to be loved, and both those things I can do. So I'm here with him now, with Piper and Isaac, and the cows and the horses, and the sheep and the dogs in the garden, and the hard work around the farm and staying alive in the country before them shapen by war. And under all those conditions, only this time the outside of me, and besides fighting back is what I discovered I do best. After all this time I know exactly where I belong, here with Edmund, and that's now how I live. Sorry, and that's how I live now, sorry. How I live now. Okay, as this is never ever done from Edmund's perspective, it's interesting because we don't know what his thoughts and feelings are. He is traumatized in a war zone. In a way, okay, Daisy swooping back in, flying back in from the States to get back to him, to basically save him, or essentially save herself, I guess. But the fact is, he's traumatized by war to the point where he can't even speak. But she's there for him. It's interesting. And it's a very interesting book. Remember, this is all from the point of view of a teenager in a war zone. But the problem is, as it's all told from Daisy's point of view, I always got the feeling she's such an unreliable narrator. I also got the thought, okay, she's kind of glossing over all the details. Any other author would go into depth and detail, but she doesn't. It's all kind of glossed over. It's basically come back to the countryside and running a farm to save her cousin's troubled soul, if you will. I did enjoy it, however. I guess I wanted more, but I thought it was very effective. Because remember, this is Daisy looking back on her life. I can imagine Daisy a couple of years earlier, so a few years down the line, sorry, just to retextualise and everything, and glossing over the detail. Anyway, How I Live Now by Meg Rosoff turned into a film. The film's actually pretty good, and I'm signing off here.